Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Fireside Creators. I am your host, Reverend Dr. Sheri Pallas. For this week's show, I am chatting with Jeff Clark about the ethos of individualism and the problems with it. I'm so honored to talk to Jeff. Please remember to keep all the comments and questions related to the show topic and that this is a safe space. Thank you for joining us, and I'm looking forward to all of your comments and questions. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe. If you're on StreamYard, say this all wrong. If you're on Facebook, grant StreamYard access so we can see your name when you have a comment or a question. I want to give a special shout out to my top sponsors, Ruth, Kirsten, Michelle, Ray, and Heidi. You guys rock. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your support. And if you would consider supporting me, you can go to sheripallas.com where you will find tons of ways. Go to the support tab and it's little as $3 a month and you can join us backstage after the show and talk to the guests. It's kind of cool. Thank you in advance, and thanks for welcoming us into your home and joining this conversation. I appreciate you all. Okay, let's meet our guest and get smarter. Jeff Clark is the producer and CEO of the Wild Goose Festival. You've heard us talk about it so much. He is the professor of information systems and an analytic. I'm really not doing well today. He is a professor of information systems and analytics and has experience in production, arts, manufacturing, banking, education, and politics. He was a managing partner of McLean Clark, a firm based in Washington, D.C. He holds a PhD in business engineering from Northwestern University and a demon. It's so funny. It's demon for ministry. Welcome, Jeff. How are you? I am so honored to be talking to you right now.
Well, thank you a lot. It's a real honor to be here. I appreciate it so much. I love your excitement and your enthusiasm.
Well, and I got to spend some time with you at the Goose riding around in your golf cart this year, which was fun. So we got to talk and do little goose stuff, running around like crazy. So I appreciate that too. But today we are talking about the ethos of independence. I mean, our country was built on independence. And when you and I were talking on the phone, it was more of a negative thing because of what we have become, an individualistic society of sort. How do you see that?
Well, yeah, I think one of the conundrums with this is that independence is such an intuitively valid thing. Of course, we want independence, and most of the things we want, the only thing that can be better is to have more of it.
Yeah,
and so we want independence, so we should have more of it. Yet, for example, I hear a lot of folks say, for example, how could evangelicals have supported Donald Trump at the level in which they did?
Yeah.
And they will quote from the Sermon on the Mount, and they'll quote from my brother's keeper, and all of those things that seem intrinsic to persons who come from various faith perspectives, not just Christian faith perspectives.
You would think, yeah.
And I think a key to that was actually stated by Kristen Dumais in her book on Jesus and John Wayne.
Mm-hmm.
She says that evangelicals did not cast their vote despite their beliefs, but because of them.
Mm. And why do you think that is? I mean, how could they be so controversial and contradictory?
Well, because the way we're interpreting independence and identifying it now as sort of the sutum bonum, as the aspirational place to locate in, makes it so supreme that it's unmitigated. There's no surrender to it. And so let me give you just a policy example. It's not uncommon to have conversation around, say, gun control, and say, gosh, we need to do something. Something. And sometimes I'll point out that we do something. For example, it's still illegal, so far as I know, at this moment in the United States of America, for a person to actually host in their house a nuclear weapon.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah, we actually do something with it. So obviously, we do have some sort of control of weapons. Yet, when we try to have a debate about it, the debate is always around my Second Amendment rights,
Yeah.
my autonomy, my independence. You can't take away my what? My rights, which is much higher than any other value system within our ethos. My
Oh yeah,
rights,
guns have more rights than I do at this point.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, and without trying to necessarily, it would not surprise anybody that where I land on that issue, but I think the reason we can't have a conversation is because when you implement independence and rights, you essentially terminate the conversation. There's no further conversation you can have around that, and that shows up in lots of areas of practical policy. It
So
shows.
let
Go
me.
ahead, Rick.
So why do the rights and my independence to own a gun and all of that cease the conversation? But when I say as a woman, I have these rights, all this conversation goes on afterwards saying, well, you don't really. Why do you have any insight into why that
Well,
is?
well, I think there are always some unintended consequences of certain things, and I think two other things that really permeate our ethos would be exceptionalism and patriarchy.
Hmm.
And I believe
Yeah.
both of those factors are fed by sort of the Davy Crockett, Daniel Boone ideal of independence. That who
Yeah.
we really are is we all have a coonskin cap, in the back of our closet that where we
George
can
Washington on the boat across the river.
exactly, where we can battle up all of the enemies because we are America and we are what? We are the greatest. That's where exceptionalism comes in. For example,
Which is
around
crap, by the
healthcare.
way.
Pardon?
Which is crap. We're not exceptional anymore.
Well, yeah. In fact, what I would say is that the exceptional thing about America is the thing that we're not being exceptional about anymore. It was the mid 1950s whenever the America, uh, what our motto changed. What's the motto of the United States now? It's "In God We Trust."
Mm-hmm.
Before that, the motto was "E pluribus unum,"
Oh
out of
yeah.
many one.
Interesting. I never put that together as such a dramatic change of philosophy.
Yes, yes. See,
Wow.
I see that as like the sort of almost like the indicator. I don't know whether it's a canary in the coal mine is an indicator or whatever,
Mhm.
but if you go all the way back even to the 19th century when folks were observing the American experiment, the thing that kind of blew folks away was was the e pluribus unum. Even though we were largely white and we were very male dominated, we still had areas in the country that were extremely religious of a certain type.
Hmm. The
We had other
Puritans, all
areas of the
that.
country that basically were populated by ex-convicts from the United Kingdom.
Mm.
There was a very diverse community that came together in these 13 colonies, and somehow or the other, we managed to be one. And then, if you look at the sort of the ongoing development of our nation, the most amazing thing is the e pluribus unum, is that factor and feature. In fact, even when we look back to the identity that a lot of people have around the deist ideal behind the American dream,
Hmm.
it was not at all a Christian expression of deism.
No.
I mean, Thomas Jefferson would probably have thought Wild Goose was a little conservative
Yeah.
on these issues.
He
No,
did not like the Puritans at all.
no. He and the Puritans were not on the same page at
Yeah,
all.
no.
They not only could not have drank beer together, they probably just couldn't have drank beer
Yeah.
together. Period. So I think this process with just to mention a couple of them there, I mentioned patriarchy and I mentioned exceptionalism, uh, really impacts things in so many crazy ways. For example, I don't know the statistic today, but uh, if I say to someone about the United States healthcare system,
Mm-hmm.
and of course we're the greatest in the world,
Mm.
according, yeah. But if I say, according to the WHO statistics on things
Mm-hmm.
like neonatal health, birth rate, all kinds of like actual, if you will, facts, like
Yeah.
actually counting how many people are dying and when, and so on
Yeah.
and so forth. The last time I personally looked, and it's been a minute, but the last time I personally looked, the United States was 50th in the world
Yeah. It's
in
low.
quality of healthcare.
Yeah.
But then people will say to me, you can't possibly have, say, a national healthcare system because that's a terrible system. Ask all those people in France or the UK. And I say, well, actually, I did because I
I
taught for
have.
a number of
Yeah.
years in France. And they said, I say, how's your healthcare system? I said, I don't really know. It's just there. It's always there.
Yeah.
It's, I don't wake up in the morning imagining that I'm not going to be able to function because my kid has sniffles or something like that.
A
So,
couple years
so
ago, I was looking to move overseas and I was checking out Spain and Italy. So, of course, I checked out their healthcare and I was absolutely amazed that as a foreigner, as an immigrant, if I were to move there, I too would have completely free healthcare. The country that I'm actually choosing to move to, hopefully soon, I have to be a citizen to get the healthcare. But it's still, I mean, the lies that the patriarchy, capitalism, and our individualism have told us, and that so many still believe that we are exceptional, is I think is a part of the huge problem. Until, I mean, what is it on in AA? Until you recognize the problem, you can't deal with it.
yes, yeah, I think um, I form a lot of my business philosophy around the work a very conservative business leader, and that would be Stephen Covey,
Oh
in
yeah,
his famous book Seven Habits of Highly Effective
yeah,
People.
I've got it.
And his sort of hinge chapter is interdependence,
Hmm.
and essentially what he says is that you can't have interdependence if you didn't first have independence, because you can't have, I can't choose to join with you unless I have that authority or that capability.
Hmm.
But then my
Okay.
morality, my ethic, my ethos, however you want to say it, should lead me in
Yeah.
that direction. Now, it's easy for me as a person who was raised in the sort of in the boundaries of the language of the Christian faith to think otherness
Hmm.
is
Yeah.
essentially a moral definition of my ethic. In fact, I believe Dietrich Bonhoeffer described Jesus Christ as a person for others.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so, if I were describing my ethos, if I were trying to say, what's important to me, I would say otherness is very central to to how I think the world works, and to do that, I have to be very interdependent. Uh,
Okay,
and
so let's define something real quick though. Otherness is not othering, right? It's
no,
not
no, no,
looking
no,
at
no,
someone as something
no.
other. It is including others into the
It's
fold.
including others
Yeah.
toward me. Yeah, yeah, that's a very good point. Uh, uh, for example, I ran across a quote in a book I was reading this summer. We had Bill McKibben at Wild Goose Festival this summer, and Bill has a relatively new book called "The Flag, the Cross, the Station Wagon." And Bill said in that book, he said the story of choosing private over public has been the crucial philosophical shift of my lifetime.
Mm,
And when 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 I was growing up, I was what we would call today, I guess, a progressive, but I was a Democrat, and I don't think all
okay.
Democrats are progressive or all Republicans are not. But uh, the debate was the role of the public institutions and the private institutions in achieving certain objectives.
Okay.
I Now those objectives are not even on the table,
No.
because the goal is all about private influence, and I attribute that very heavily. I'm looking around to find uh, a book title here. I think the thing that really dominates American philosophy is Ayn Rand.
Oh yeah, huge.
Yeah, and in fact, of the matter is, I'll tell you this story. In the mid 1990s, I was the treasurer of the Tennessee Democratic Party, and as such, I was invited to speak in lots of places. And I was speaking at a pretty large rally of about 500 young Democrats, and I have this odd background of having both theology and business, and so sometimes I'm there because I can do business, So I was there basically to talk about the business of politics, and I was a featured speaker, and the featured speaker in front of me was a media consultant, and it was one of those kind of things. If you're an older guy and there's a bunch of young people there and they're taking notes, you just imagine that they're amazing, that you're just wow, you're incredible. And so this person who was a friend of mine at the time does his little dog and pony show, and he gets through, and somebody says, "Well, Mister," called him by name, "what would you have us to do in order to have the impact in society that you've had?" And I'm like, "Gosh, they're blowing smoke up his," which he really enjoys, by the way. So he screamed and pawned for a minute, and he says, "Read, by all means, read."
Hmm.
I thought, all right, I'm a reader. I thought that's pretty good. And they said, "Well, what would you have us read?" And he said two things: the Holy Bible, and I want to note he said the Holy Bible, and this is a quote unquote progressive Democrat media consultant. I read the Holy Bible, and you know what the other thing he said was?
Anne's book.
Atlas Shrugged from Ayn Rand. And since you've said this is an I don't know
Adult
how
show.
else to say this except for say I said it under my breath, "Oh shit."
Yeah.
That's not possible.
Yeah.
And so that was almost 30 years ago, and I've been processing that conundrum ever since then, because that's still being done in churches today, especially the evangelical churches.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and so how can they say read the Bible, the Holy Bible, however you want to call it, and Atlas Shrugged? You know the title of Ayn Rand's book on ethics? It's actually called, and I'm reading it right here, The Virtue of Selfishness. I've read it many times.
Wow.
In fact, she points out in there that altruism is incompatible with freedom, with capitalism and individual rights. She says, the day the world is facing a choice, if civilization is to survive the altruistic morality men have to reject. Yet the churches are basically still saying, read Atlas Shrugged in the Bible.
Which is technically anti-Christ. That's one of the things that makes my head explode. It's like, how can you say that you're a Christian, meaning following Christ, and then disregard everything except for Paul? It just, I mean, where's the love? As the songs say, where is the love?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's been kind of I guess, a space I've spent a lot of my time in over these decades, having worked a lot in politics and in public policy, and then in and around the faith community a lot. I know um, it would probably shock people if they were to query their friends, the most important books in their life, how frequently Atlas Shrugged will show up. Now, here's the other thing that really troubles me about that, and I feel okay saying this because the person uh, has passed on. Otherwise, he would have been someone that would have watched this because he would have just been interested. But one of the most influential persons in my life, my high school civics teacher,
Hmm.
um, the person whose name I actually used for years as the password on all of my bank accounts, your favorite teacher. I mean, that level of impact in my life.
Okay.
Uh, uh, I was shocked if he's been gone for maybe 8 or 10 years. So 15 or 20 years ago, I was shocked in some sort of casual interaction with him to see him make reference to how much he liked Atlas Shrugged. Now, he was not the kind of person that would have processed, if you will, the philosophical incongruities. He just was like it. No, if you read it without any prompting, it sort of scratches the independent itch. It sort of scratches the idea that independence and autonomy is good and
Power.
The
It's
bootstrap,
power. Yeah.
all of that stuff. And so I'm just like, well, if Mr. So and so believes that, it's easy to understand how much other people believe that, and how easy it is for a high-profile evangelical pastor to do direct quotes from Atlas Shrugged and have people go buy it, because that's happening.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with trauma, the need to have your own individualistic power, the ego trip of not needing anyone or not needing to rely on anyone. I mean, that's a huge thing in the GOP right now is, well, they've claimed for years that, personal accountability, personal responsibility. One of the things that really struck me when we were talking on the phone was that the whole Obama line of "you didn't get here yourself," and the GOP went nuts. And the whole point is that we don't get anywhere by ourselves. We are community. We all do this together. And thinking that you're just the individual and just you matter has devolved our entire society. I had a HOA in the last place I lived in Florida, and they couldn't get anything done. Nothing. There was problems all over the community, but because half of the people said, no, that's not my problem if they have something over there. So there was just whole dysfunction because there was no standard for community there. It was still the individualism, only I matter. I pay my HOA dues. That's all that matters. Leave me alone. Don't include me in anyone else. And the place fell apart.
But I agree with you. I experience it in all the places that I've up into the world, which is like everywhere, because we've so enshrined independence, and it also creates a sense of isolation and autonomy.
Totally.
And I think I don't know if this is going off in the wrong direction, but to the extent, and as a person who remains connected to the faith world, I still hope that there's a role for faith communities. I think the number one engine of community in my lifetime has been the faith community. So when we make the faith community more about independence, isolation, me too, that kind of thing, we not only we're literally abandoning our obligation for connection and community. And I think that the most hopeful thing about a faith community is connection through community.
Well, that's the whole point, though, right? I mean, when people leave religion, the community is literally the first thing they say they miss. And when I left, people, when I had hard times and stuff like that, people would say, well, what's your church? And it was, I don't have a church because of, I didn't find my community there. I found it to be judgmental, all of those things. But that is why everybody goes, is because of that community, that camaraderie. And then when it's turned into us versus them as we're the cool kids and they're all burning in hell, it just creates that individualism and isolation even further, right?
Yeah, I agree. I agree 1,000%. And I think some of the antidotes to this would be for those of us who remain in the faith community to maybe accentuate connection and community. I struggle with the I struggle with the process of it's very easy to be a critic. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure I'm right about some of this. I'm sure I'm wrong about some of it.
Hmm.
And there's almost no cost or consequence to me to just like give my critical assessment of, you know, independence and greed and so on and so forth. I wrote an article 20 something years ago called America Caught in the Grips of Greed.
Mm.
Um, you know, finding out what we do about that. So my hope is that we maybe begin to pull the tide back, not so much around a classic theological debate in which we have to argue about, biblical battles,
Hmm.
inerrancy and so on and so forth, but
Yeah.
that maybe we pull it back around connection and community.
But that's really difficult to do when the dogma is division. When the dogma is we are right and they are wrong, which is one of the reasons I love the Wild Goose so much, is because you can have these really tough philosophical questions and conversations, and everybody's like, oh, really? You think that? That's interesting, as opposed to what you see on social media and what you get out in the world. There's an acceptance there. There's an openness there. But when religion is heading towards inclusion and exclusivity, that community is going to become the clique. It's going to become the cult. It's going to be the antithesis of what you and I are talking about right now.
Well, I have this very, I don't know quite how to say it. I have this hope that the generations 2 layers beneath me know better than that.
I hope so too. I
Uh,
really do. I hope that the change is going to come.
my uh, I sometimes have the debate with my youngest child about let's just don't create a new set of others
Yeah.
because that's kind of how we do it. But on the other hand, um, it's it's easier for I think it's easier for the young for the 20s and 30s to maybe not so fully embrace otherness.
Yeah.
Um, and that's one of the reasons why when I'm just chatting with folks and they're saying, well, where would you get help? What would you do? I say, well, I mean, do you read any Richard Rohr, for example?
Yeah.
Uh, and of course, that's an ex-evangelical advocating that you read,
Hmm.
active Catholic person, mostly around his thoughts around non-binary thinking. I find it easier to talk with younger people about non-binary thinking
Yeah.
than than I do older people, and it may just be because as we're older people, it's so embedded in us, or it may be that the young people just don't uh, think of it quite that way.
Well, they're seeing and growing up in a diversity that very few of us did. So when they see it firsthand and then hear the rhetoric, hear the hate, it just doesn't resonate. So that's the beauty of it. I mean, so many people have grown up in a white only town, maybe a token person of color or something to that effect, but didn't really get that diversity. In our country now, diversity is so huge, which I think is why the patriarchy, why the white supremacy are saying, oh no, and they're freaking out because there is so much diversity. You kind of have to love your neighbor. And if the dogma is the antithesis of that, that's where we create the violence, the hate, and all of that, right?
Well, yes, and in that same kind of in that same vein, I think one of the great tragedies of the current political conversation, and I'll put these words in the former president's mouth, seeing those people that are different as enemies.
Yeah.
If I could identify someone as an enemy, then I have different rights over them than I do if I'm
Yeah.
identifying them as just different. Um, and so there's, I think, a very loud, very determined, but shrinking population. That's my hope. Shrinking
Yeah.
population that's demanding that, even as we battle today over the selection of a new Speaker of the House and how all that's going. It's just I sometimes think I'm not reading the newspaper correctly if I think it's shrinking, but maybe
Yeah.
I just hope it is. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the millennials, nothing is binary to them. I mean, nothing is black and white. And I love that. I
Yeah.
love that their focus is the gray. I love that their focus are, forgive me, but boomers and saying, we're not going to do this anymore. We're not going to have this antiquated thought. We're not going, we are going to do better. And I think a lot of it is labeling. I think a lot of the non binary and othering is saying we're not going to play by your rules anymore because your rules have gotten us into this mess. So out of the mouths of babes, I see it. I see it a lot. I think our generation is not looking at kids going, oh, those dratted kids. We're like, okay, you're getting it. You're getting it. You're doing okay. And you guys are learning better than we did.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. I think I see somebody popped up there talking about us versus them as in kind of an evangelical disease or something
Yeah,
like that.
that's Mike Zanker.
Um, um, One of the ways uh, when I read Matthew 5, 6, and 7, to which we refer as the Sermon on the Mount,
Mm-hmm.
uh, which biblically we know was not the sermon, not probably related to a mountain for that matter. But I want us to remember that history had been in existence, no matter whether you believe in a fake ark in northern Kentucky that you can go visit,
Yeah.
or whatever. History had been going on for thousands of years before then. So our physical experience of Jesus the human, Jesus the person, entered into an existing structure. Part of why that was so resonant is because it was so resonant, not because it was so new. If that
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah, it's like, yeah, well, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, you treat even the ideal of the so-called golden rule was resonant because it wasn't like, wow, he just invented thinking, you know.
Yeah, no. I mean, they
Yeah, it's like
claimed it,
doing
with
this for a
Adam and
while.
Eve and all of that. But I just
But
watched a documentary last week about a civilization living alongside the Neanderthals 40 to 50,000 years ago, which that type of length of time just blows my mind. And they were doing stuff that we can't even do now without tools. So we still don't understand the brilliance of our ancestors. We've got all the baggage. We have all their baggage and all of their ignorance and ego driven. We have all the stories of that, but we have missed so much of the goodness because of tribalism, because of individuality, because of a lack of community, and or that community fighting against each other like we see in Gaza and Israel right now.
yes, absolutely. Um, I agree 1,000%. I have an assignment that I occasionally use in one of my graduate classes. It's not intended to provoke a particular response, but ever so often, someone will literally quote, "Do unto others, you'd have them do unto you." You know, the golden rule.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm remembering correctly. I think that has been directly quoted. I've taught for a long time, over 30 years. Over those decades, I think it's been directly quoted 7 times.
Wow.
Six of them by Muslim students.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess I'm sort of leaning back to our general sense of, almost a sense of embedded exceptionalism. We think we're right about everything. Um,
So we won't learn.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I want to run back and mention. I want to mention another book
Okay.
that I think folks might find interesting if they at all. There's a book called Mean Girl.
Oh, okay. I'm
MEAN.
familiar with that. Yeah.
Mean Girl. Lisa Dugan wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's Ayn Rand and the Culture of Greed. It's a small and fairly simple paperback. That's a copy of it. I think it's a good book to take a look at
Okay.
if you're just kind of wanting jump into this stuff. And Lisa Dugan wrote a good book. Oh gosh, it's been 20 years ago on her frame of reference then was mostly around the twilight of equality. And her work, her subtitle on the twilight of equality is Neoliberalism, Cultural Politics, and the Attack on Democracy. Because a part of the hypothesis around the so-called neoliberalism is that in essence, it embodies the abandonment of independence by over accentuating it, if that makes any sense.
I think that I'm a control freak, and I've come to grips with that. But I am a control freak because of a lack of trust.
Mm-hmm.
I am a control freak because of a lack of resources. So I think that as long as people are afraid, as long as people are stressed out and not trusting, asking them to be in a community that they may not even agree with most of the people that are in there might be too much to ask, out of fear of joining, out of fear of the vulnerability. So how do we get our society to trust each other enough that we can remember that we are all in this together? I mean, every day I'm screaming on social media, we the people, come on. And we have completely just disregarded that. You know, it's my show, it's highway, you know, all of that. So how do we say, can you just trust your neighbor? Maybe not love them right now, but at least trust them enough to work together. How do we get back to that?
Well, I think you put that really well, Sheri. I think you're pointing to like a really deep vein of the disease. There's such intrinsic distrust.
Yeah.
And so when I essentially invite you, encourage you, facilitate your distrust, it's easy to cause you to believe that you should.
Yeah.
And
self-fulfilling prophecies there.
Yeah, I think that that shows up in all of our tendencies to our sense of conspiracy and so forth. There's always a an us versus them kind of a thing. And
I mean, we see that all over the world right now. It's pick a side. I mean, and I've been standing here for a week going, I'm not going to pick a side. I'm not going to pick a side. I'm going to pick the side of the people, not any government or anything like that. But it's all about, I don't know. I always say it's the mental capacity of football. You know, all of our measurements are according to a football field. All of our societal culture is based on the terms of football: us, them, teams, go team, they suck. The ability to overlook unethical behavior, immorality, because that's on your team. So I don't know how to say to remember. I mean, because it truly is a remembrance that we are all supposed to be on the same team. Democrats, Republicans, independents, we're all Americans. So we were supposed to be on the same team and unite, but our politics, the division, the patriarchy, all of that just continues to divide us.
Well, I don't know the answer, but I'm looking for a better surgical tool in this regard for this reason. It's when you think of neoliberalism, which is basically the celebration of autonomy and independence and capitalism unfettered, it's really easy to basically identify that as being a Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher occurrence, and you don't get a lot of dispute or argument around that.
Yeah.
Now, the next thing I'm going to say is going to shock my political friends. Got to watch out saying this.
Yeah, I'm holding on.
The perpetuation of that philosophy was expressed by President Clinton, and to some extent President Obama also.
How so?
Well, NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, advocated by Clinton, is very classic neoliberalism.
Oh, why? I thought that would be more communal.
No, it was break it loose and let it roll.
Interesting. I'd never heard it put in those terms before.
Well, and I worked for Barack Obama and have a huge regard there. But if you read the political philosophy over the last 15 or 20 years, a lot of folks say that President Obama had a strong neoliberal inclination also.
Okay.
Now, we have a tendency, the people that are the friends of our friends are our friends, and the enemies of our that thing. I'm trying to dissect a little differently here to where, like, when I've had this conversation around neoliberals, independence, interdependence, with very well versed contemporary progressive thinkers, they're not on the same page as me. Now, that doesn't mean, well, they obviously have to be wrong or they would be on the same page as me.
Of course.
Yeah. But we have a lot of conversation around everything that Ronald Reagan did is not neoliberal. I don't know what I'm saying there, but I'm just going to say.
Can you explain neoliberal? Because I've never heard that term before. I've heard neo-Nazi, neoconservative, but what is neoliberalism to you? What does that mean?
It's basically neoliberalism often shows up politically as a libertarian.
Oh.
Now, some
Okay.
Ayn Rand folks think libertarians are capturing their ethos.
Yeah.
But it's usually about the individual, and it's usually about the free market.
Okay. Free market meaning capitalism.
Capitalism, unfettered capitalism. In fact, the matter is, I teach with a person who is, I'm not sure now, but I know when the person came to my university, he came under the auspices of Koch brothers funding.
Oh, okay.
All right. Now you say, well, wow, what kind of university are you located at? Oh, I'm at a state university. The Koch brothers intentionally spent millions of dollars funding professorships at state universities.
Which is ironic because they hate education.
Well, this person has now, we've got a new process going around some, what we would call, I guess, business education, like working with industry. This person has proposed a course called The Moral Foundations of Business.
Okay. The Old Testament, in part of the 613 commandments, covers that. So is it unethical? Is it again just egotistical and centrally on individualism?
I'm not sure I followed your question. I may have been.
Okay, so in the Torah, there are 613 commandments, and there are a ton about how to do taxes, businesses, how to work with your competitors, all of that.
Yeah.
Is that the vein of this course, or is it more?
No.
Okay.
No. The vein of this course. This person's doctorate is from a modest, not terribly impactful state university in Virginia.
Okay.
And I think the person, by the way, just parenthetically, is a very nice person. I serve on committees. I think he's an intelligent, good person. But the premise is the moral foundations of business. And I must say, I'm guessing here because I haven't seen his syllabus, but I have had meetings with the person around neoliberalism and that the moral foundations of business. I'm going to hypothesize, and I need to acknowledge I'm making this up, but I'm going to hypothesize.
Fair enough.
That the moral foundations of business are rooted in the autonomy of capital, financial capital.
Oh, not people.
Not people.
Mm. That was the foundation of slavery.
Well, you could get there, I think, yeah. But if you organize business, uh, the premise, going back to where we were talking, the neoliberalism premise, is the primacy of financial capital,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, which to me, let me also say here, since I'm out there on shaky grounds, let me say,
Step
uh,
on in it.
let me say that uh, economic systems almost always begin with a moral assumption.
Okay.
So, for example, if you basically are teaching, uh, if you're picking up I got another book around here that was popular, former Nobel Prize winner Milton Friedman. You all
Okay.
remember Milton Friedman, Nobel
Mm-hmm.
Prize winner,
Please.
University of Chicago. University of Chicago has housed many Nobel Prize winners. Uh, they all come from a particular economic, no, I shouldn't say that. They mostly come from a particular economic vein. Read this book without a lot of information. It sounds like a really good thing to do.
Okay.
But it's basically the economic philosophy of libertarianism. Ayn Rand is the philosopher of libertarianism, and they provide the mechanism for how you implement if you will, a libertarian point of view. And the
I've
libertarian
had
point of
so
view
many
is,
arguments over the years about Freakonomics, and I think it's similar because Freakonomics, have you read that book?
yes, it's been a while.
Yeah. But again, it's individualism, and nothing really matters. You're doing this to just spin your wheels. And while on the surface, that's right. While on the surface, capitalism looks like the best thing in the world, when you dig down to it, I have yet to find any type of economical political system that is entirely good. There's parts of it.
Sure.
But again, it always goes back to greed. You lose sight of the people, you lose sight of the mission, which is why so many companies do mission statements. So they try not to do that. And it gets into the almighty dollar as opposed to all of the people who are trying to bring you the success.
Well, yes. Um, I don't have an alternative that I would choose to live under as
Yeah,
opposed to capitalism.
I know it's tough.
Having said that, um, I don't choose to live under unfettered capitalism. Let me give you an
Exactly.
example. Um, I wouldn't want to do this now, uh, but 20 years ago, I could have chosen to have become a brain surgeon. Now, not
Okay.
because I went to medical school or because I know anything about medicine, but because they make really good money.
Yeah.
And I just think I don't even have to be a brain surgeon very long. You know what I mean? I could maybe kill the first 19 out of 20 people and do pretty well. You know what I'm saying? But why can't I be a brain surgeon?
Oh,
I'm, there are regulations to my entry,
yeah.
right? In other words, just using that as an example, because I do a lot of work around healthcare policy and politics. There's almost nothing more regulated, if you will, than segments of the healthcare industry.
Yeah.
You can't choose to. You can even be an MD and can't claim to be a neurosurgeon if you didn't do certain kinds of things. You know what I
Exactly.
mean?
Yeah.
It's like it's highly regulated. So access to the market is highly regulated. Uh, and there's even a 1956 article called Theory of Second Best that actually says that when you have uh, the presumption of free market, but it has isolated limitations, it will actually create counterproductive outcomes.
Mm.
So I live in Nashville, Tennessee, which has been called the Silicon Valley of the healthcare industry. It's it's
Oh,
where
okay.
it's where Hospital Corporation of America was created in the late
HCA.
1960s.
Yeah.
And HCA was actually created according to the daughter of one of the creators under the premise of using the same business model that person used to create Kentucky Fried Chicken, and
Oh, wow.
and, and
Oh,
so
wow.
later,
Fast food and
later
healthcare, they
on,
go together?
yeah, later on, the
Ooh.
prison industry, the prison for profit industry,
Mm,
and and uh, and that's recorded. I mean, that person,
yeah.
whenever a certain college named its School of Business after her then deceased father, she pointed out that in his lifetime he had essentially helped to create three industries, and one of them was fast foods,
Wow.
prisons, and healthcare. And
So bizarre.
yeah, it's the same sort of model. I mean, think about it. If it's the 1960s and you want something that's a really good industry, you can look around and say, you know what? I think people are going to get sick. They're going to keep getting sick.
From eating Kentucky Fried Chicken.
But yeah. So we give them more Kentucky Fried Chicken, they'll get sick
You take
fast.
them from all segments. You go eat, you get sick. We can handle
Yeah,
it all.
yeah, exactly. But we had this marvelous thing came along then called Medicare, Medicaid. It's like, you know what? You make a pretty daggone good living if you had nothing but older people and persons who were on Medicaid assistance paying your bills. So now all of a sudden you had a documented revenue flow for handling your financial capital,
Yeah.
and that's where that system grew out of. And yeah, so uh,
Big business and health. I mean, that's why I see with the UK and all over Europe where they have said no, money and humans should not come together. They should not be. I mean, people across the world look at us and go, really? Someone's going to die because they're poor? They're not going to get the health care? It's anti-Christ, it's anti-Christian, and yet we're supposedly a Christian nation. I mean, just the hypocrisy just flows.
yeah,
It drives me crazy. I just sit here and go, how can you say this and that and do that? It's illogical. And I think that builds a lack of trust. I think that builds trauma. I think that builds an instability and division. And I cannot argue that it's not methodical. I at this point, I think it's methodical.
well, we had to have elevated the moral right of individual choice in order for that to be morally correct. And that's
Okay.
essentially what we do with the with this conversation we're having, that individualism, it's my right. As long as I'm exercising my right, it's my right to exercise my right, you know, and you can't impose upon it, you can't impinge upon it. And I am not my brother's keeper. Uh, I, I, I do not have an obligation to others. And you can go back and do all sorts of easy arithmetic. For example, the so-called welfare state. Let's go back to President Clinton, who I have hanging on my wall here a picture of me with President Clinton. Just so
Okay.
okay. But what was his phrase on welfare?
Oh,
Jesus,
he's
what
the
was?
one that started the welfare queens, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so you know, there were a lot of issues that kind of came along, and I think they were blown by the wind of sort of the individualism, the neoliberalism kind of wind, and uh, they've sort of shown up in other places. And now, for example, it's real easy for you to do the arithmetic and prove that corporate welfare is much more expensive than
Huge.
individual welfare,
Yeah.
hugely so. Yet there's never a conversation about how much money we spend to support X, Y, or Z.
Well, Occupy Wall Street attempted that, and a lot of people died from it.
Yeah, exactly. Uh,
I do want to get to Mike's question. So, how does all of this deep history then lead us towards some type of hope beyond individualism? And I want to actually comment on that before, too. Historically, the people who were the isolationists, the assholes, were the pariahs of the society. The people who couldn't get along with the community were outcasts. Now we have I mean, it's an American right to be an asshole. It is an American right to be stupid or ignorant. But it's also a right to exclude the community. But when that happens in our politics, in our cities, in our local things, that's when we get catastrophic failure. That's when countries collapse. So how do we fix it? How do we find the hope behind that?
I'm going to try to listen. I'm going to try to respond to that. But I'm looking for
Okay.
something that I wrote down this week because it came from. Let's see if I've got that in here. Just one more comment around that sort of vein, if I may.
Yeah, of
This
course.
week, when Donald Trump was being addressed around his deceit on valuation of property,
Yeah.
this is what Donald Trump said. He said, it's like a buyer beware clause, he told the reporters in the courthouse hallway. He's claimed that the banks he did business with weren't harmed. They made lots of money in his deals, and to this day, they have no complaints.
Yeah.
So, but what we can't deal with on that sort of arithmetic is when that has not worked for Donald Trump, what has been his answer? Bankruptcy.
It's everybody else's fault. Yeah, or it's somebody else's fault.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
We as the taxpayers were hurt. The New York taxpayers were hurt. The banks, sure, they got their money, but again, there's no morality there. And one of the things I want to share is the difference between morality and ethics. Or ethics are personal, and morality is community involved. So the community decides what's moral and what's not. So we have decided that law breaking is immoral. As a country, we are based on laws, but yet the most powerful people in Washington are completely disregarding these morals. They are completely disregarding any accountability, any personal responsibility, and again, further dividing us. So how do we get beyond, especially that guy?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to loop back to that guy and then try to respond to you because
Okay.
I want to say it this way. The ethic behind, if we to use your phrase, if you will, the moral presumptions behind his statement was that he says they made lots of money in his deals. In other words, the central factor of the ethos is the money. They made money. So if you lied, he's saying, essentially he's saying, it's like buyers beware. He's saying, look, they're dealing with Donald fucking Trump. They ought to know I was going to lie. Shit.
Which is so funny because he always used to tell that snake story about being a snake, and it's him. It's totally him.
He says they knew I was lying, but they made money on it. And so teach your children that. Get your 8 and 9-year-olds together and say, start working on this right now because this is going to be the world that you
I don't want to live in a world like that. There's no love.
I think a part of the answer, I'm going to just make up some stuff here for just a second.
Okay.
I'm going to act like that there are other people that call themselves progressive, of which I identify myself as progressive. Okay. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to offend some folks in saying this. One of my hypotheses out of the right wing is that if you draw Venn diagrams, if you take a circle here, and this is the group that believes this, and then here's another Venn diagram, and they're a little different. Here's another Venn diagram. The right wing tends to coalesce if there's any overlap. The progressives tend to separate if there's not full compliance.
Oh, wow. So true. That is so true. The Democrats have to be perfect before any acceptance. The Republicans are just like, eh.
Well, even when you come to Wild Goose Festival, gosh, get mad at me, Wild Goose folks, but everybody's happy when everybody's happy. But if somebody's not exactly where you are on that particular thing, you sort of have to be left out.
Really? I have not seen that at the Goose. I mean, I had some really intense conversations.
Maybe I shouldn't say that at the Goose because we work hard to make it not true at the Goose.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that when we interact, when we interact with persons with whom there's not uniformity. Sometimes there's disagreement on the disagreements. What's most important is that you can't get everybody together, if you will, at the same rally. Let's disregard Wild Goose. Let's just go to a larger sense. It's like, for example, faith communities don't always have the same set of assumptions about certain sort of core beliefs. And we tend to separate on our differences more than we ally
Yeah.
on our similarities, is basically what I'm saying. So I think
And
that
that's
would
our
be,
culture. I mean, focus on the bad stuff, not on our similarities, none of that. And that causes it's again, it's an othering. It's, it's an ego based, I'm better than you, I have to know more than you, as opposed to, again, looking at them like your brother, your neighbor, all of those things. It becomes a competition.
yeah. Well, I think if we can really get better at not othering those people with whom
Yeah.
we're almost not other with, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
If I can, I think as a practical matter, we build a bigger tent, if you will, where we can function more effectively. As long as we isolate on our divisions, we're going to get smaller and less impactful. And I just would like to encourage us to figure out how to unite on our similarities.
I love that. And one of my favorite nights at the Goose was when we were all piled in the tent because it was raining. That was community right there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we are at the top of the hour. What a phenomenal show. Thank you so much, Jeff. Any final words, and where can people find you?
WildGooseFestival.org. We'll be back at Van Hoy Farms in Statesville, North Carolina next summer, July 11th through 14th. Big programs already being put together. Looking like it's going to be a really good festival. Hope to see you there.
I will see you there too. Thanks again. I'm going to send you backstage. Any final words? Any comments?
No, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Bye.
I'm going to send you backstage. I'll see you in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, what another great show. I love learning things. I love talking to such amazing people like Jeff. If you liked it, share it, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you subscribe, then you get reminders every week that we're on the air. Thank you so much. And next week's show, I am chatting with Matt Hartley about Christians fighting Christian nationalism. It's going to be another fantastic show. Thank you so much. Oh, I'm seeing some comments come through. Oh, thank you, Kara Ann. Thank you. Heidi's going to be there again. And Mike, thanks for heckling me the entire show again. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful week. And always remember, walk in love. Mwah! See you soon.